Okay, today we are going to actually start designing our maze within Tinkercad itself. I need you to really pay attention to the measurements that I'm going to be showing you today so that you're sure that the maze that you create will actually work and the ball will actually roll through it properly. I'm going to put the list of measurements in your description of the project or the assignment today within Google Classroom. So you'll have them, but you can kind of bounce back and forth to reference them if you forget, or I recommend more likely building it with me, pausing the video and going and doing the different steps as I do it so you remember. So it'll be in two different places depending on how you work best. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is start by creating our floor. So we have our work plane here. And we know that we can rotate this. We can look at the top and bottom. So make sure we're building at the top. You also have the block here that shows you what direction you're facing in. We're going to build the bottom of our maze by pulling out a basic block. So it's just a click and drag or a click and then pull it over. And we're going to change the size of this to make it flat like a floor. So first we're going to make it 80 by 80 millimeters long. So this is going to keep it in a perfect square because we want it to be a square. So we're doing 80 by 80. Make sure you're changing both measurements so it's a perfect square. And clearly this is going to be way too thick to leave, so we also need to change the height. Remember, 3D means 3 measurements we have to work with all the time. We're going to make the height 2 millimeters. All right, so there's our actual base here. Okay, so we're going to change that. And I'm actually going to change the color of this to gray just so that it differentiates between my walls and my floor. Remember, when I'm printing with the 3D printer, I only have one, maybe 2 colors that I can use. The new one, I believe, does have a dual spool, so I might be able to do this in 2 different colors where I have the base as one color and the walls as a different color. But just remember, it's whatever color's loaded. Whatever color you put here, I can't pick for you. It's going to be whatever is already loaded in the machine when I print, okay? But I would still keep it with 2 colors just to make it easier to see. All right, so there's our basic floor. The next thing we need to add is our walls. Now, our walls are going to be all the way around the outside, all 4 walls of the floor. So again, I'm going to pull out a box. Okay, we're going to change our box to be 80 inches long. And depending if you're making the top or the width, one of them is going to be 80. Like that. And then the other way, the width here is going to be 1.5. Okay, because we don't want our walls to be overly thick. It will like kind of overtake the inside of the floor, but at the same time, we don't want it too thin because it will print in breaking. So it's kind of like that, finding that in between. The other thing you want to check always is the height. We want our height to be 10. 20 is too tall, so we're going to make it 10 high. So we made one wall 80 by 1.5 by 10. And now what I can do is I can use my arrow keys on the keyboard or click and drag, whatever's easier for you. And I'm going to position it over top of the edge. All right, and if we really want to get fancy, I think I can use the alignment tool. So what I did there for the alignment tool, if you don't remember from last year, I click, I drag a box around both of those things. I choose to align. And then what I can do is I can align all the way to the end here like this, and I click, and now I know that they're straight, they're touching, and they're aligned perfectly. All right, and I do want to keep this flush on the ground so that I know that it's all touching, so you can kind of see that it just meets up with it, so I know that it's going to meld together. That's important. All right, once you do this wall, what I would do then is duplicate. Remember how we duplicated last year? We click on what we want to duplicate. We use Control and the letter D, and then we walk it straight across here. Okay, what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to use the alignment tool again, but before I do that, I want to group these first 2 walls because I don't want these to disconnect. I want these 2 to stay connected. So I'm going to click and drag just around that wall and a piece of the floor. I'm going to group it so it's one thing. And now I can align this whole piece and this other wall. So I'm going to click and drag, hit that alignment tool, align all the way to the side like that. And now once again, I can group again. All right, so now I have 2 of the 3 walls. I'm going to change this back to gray because I want this to be gray because I'm going to make my walls red. And there we have it. If you haven't started, if you want to kind of pause the video here and go and do that now, make your floor 80 by 80 and make your walls, 80 by 1.5 by 10. You can go do that and then come back to the video to see the next two walls. All right, so now top and bottom walls. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull out a box. This time we need to make it this way 80, right? The length of it 80. So I'm going to click here, click down here and type 80. Now I have it the right length. I'm going to change my width to 1.5 again. 1.5, hit enter, and I have to change my height to 10. Right? These are all the things that we need to make sure it's all matching up properly. And since everything's grouped here, I can now align this one piece with this one piece just like we did before, but now we're going to use a different alignment button. We're going to hit align. This time we're going to align to this end. And if you hover, you can kind of see where things are going to go. So we're going to do both of these things. We're going to come to the end like this, and we're going to come to the end like this, right? These little corner pieces, and you can see how perfectly now that lines up. And I'm going to rotate because I'm working in a 3D world, and it's easier for me if I change my view. It's up to you, but I like changing the view. Again, click on the wall, duplicate, Control D. Use the arrow key now, and you can walk it straight across. All right, this just makes it faster. This way you're not constantly doing the measurements over and over and over again. Now, it looks like I have it lined up. Just to double check, though, I'm going to group this side first, and then I'm going to align the other side, right, just to make sure. See how I'm slightly off? If it's not grayed out, it's not perfectly aligned. So this is slightly off, so I can click that, and now it's perfectly aligned, and now I can group it again. And I'm going to go back to gray. And there you have it. So that's the basis of your maze. So now we have this perfect box where we can build our maze. And you see our little bit of a wall here. Okay. So at this point, if you have not created the base of your maze, I suggest pausing the video here. Go make the base before you come out to do the next part, because the next part's a totally different thing. All right. So go ahead and pause and move on to the next thing. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create the ball. And the reason why we're creating the ball now is because we can then use the ball to create the holes for our starts and stops, right? So it's very simple. We already have a sphere shape. We're going to pull that sphere shape out. Let's put it over here. And we want this to be exactly 7 millimeters. Now remember, this is a sphere. So all three measurements have to be the same in order for it to stay round. If it's not the same, it's going to be oval and it's going to be like an egg and it's not going to roll. So make sure you're changing all three. We click this corner white block and we change this number to 7, this number to 7, and then clearly that's not a ball. So click on the height and we're going to choose this one as 7 as well. All right, so now we have this little tiny sphere that we can use to drop inside the maze and actually play the game. What I need you to do now is grab this sphere and duplicate it. So again, we're going to click it and Control D to duplicate. I would use your arrow keys to drag it out. Sometimes when something's this small and you try to click it with the mouse, you accidentally grab like one of the resizing handles, and then it's all stretched out of shape. And you think that it looks round, but it's not actually round. That's why I use my keyboard a lot, because that avoids that mistake of accidentally stretching things. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I have now 2 spheres. I don't need to. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make this slightly bigger. And I do say slightly because I'm literally changing it by 0.5 millimeter. So we're going to make this one 7.5 by 7.5, right? All three, always 3 by 7.5. I'm making this slightly bigger because this is going to be the hole that this drops into, and I want it to be able to fall into that hole. So we're going to position this in your maze wherever it is that your hole would be. So if this is the front, right, where the work plane is, this is the front, you need to move this to where your hole is going to be, okay? I'm going to put it up here in the corner for myself. All right. Now, if I left this, I can leave this the way it is because if you notice, I built this on the plane. So it's actually going to go right through to that base without cutting quite all the way through. So now what I can do is I can change this into a hole. So remember, we can change any solid object to a hole. We click on it first, and then we come over here, and this is our hole option, right? We just click that, and now it's kind of grayed out. But remember, if you were to send this to me and I printed this hole would not show up because you have not actually cut the hole yet. You have to group it before it's cut in. Before I group it, though, I need a second one, right? Because I need a starting spot and an ending spot. So Control D again to duplicate. Wherever your ending spot's going to be, I'm going to put it in the opposite corner. Okay, and now this is where we're going to end my game. Now, in order to make this a true hole, you need to actually click and drag, highlight everything, and group, right? We group it, and there we go. Now we have these little cutouts where the ball can drop into, and it can like land when you're playing the game. All right, so that is the major parts that you needed to complete today. What I'd like to do tomorrow is actually move on to creating the walls by, again, using the basic shapes that are over here, but also, you know, you can just use basic rectangles. But we will go through that tomorrow in tomorrow's class. So today, your accomplishment is just the base, the walls, the sphere, and then the beginning hole and the end hole, so we know where our track needs to run. All right. If you have any questions, if you get stuck, remember I am in the Google Meet. You can hop on in and ask me a question. I'm also on GoGuardian. You can go ahead and ask me a question there, and I'll do my best to kind of guide you. I can't physically help you, but hopefully we can kind of figure it out through those two means. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.